Do you honestly believe a custodian can figure out what Princeton's finest physicians cannot?
Cure me and I'll marry you. I'm trying to protect you from him.
Do you honestly believe a custodian can figure out what Princeton's finest physicians cannot? Elena Whitmore's sharp voice pierced through the tense atmosphere of the executive boardroom at Whitmore Healthcare Complex, Chicago's most prestigious medical facility. Isaiah had been sanitizing the hallway when he caught snippets of the medical team debating her puzzling condition. Unable to remain quiet while witnessing them chase completely incorrect theories, he had walked forward with a bold medical insight that silenced everyone instantly. Elena's brother, Daniel, instantly exploded with something uglier than simple judgment. "Remove this black custodian immediately," he growled, stepping to physically obstruct Isaiah from the discussion. "We're not accepting medical guidance from people like him." Yet Elena, frantic after 9 months of declining health and confronting experimental procedures with terrible survival rates, delivered an unthinkable proposition that would transform everything. "All right, cure me and I'll become your wife." Have you ever faced dismissal because of your occupation, while someone simultaneously tried to tear you down because of your ethnicity? The statement lingered like an impossible challenge to everything reasonable about reality. Elena Whitmore, successor to a biotech fortune valued at $13 billion, had just proposed marriage to Isaiah Williams, a midnight shift custodian whose monthly earnings couldn't match her weekly jewelry expenses. The executive boardroom at Whitmore Healthcare Complex had become an unexpected setting for this shocking offer. Ceiling-high windows framed Chicago's sparkling downtown, while inside the cherrywood table overflowed with medical documentation, laboratory results, and the growing panic of 9 months without solutions. Dr. Rebecca Chen from Princeton sat motionless with her stylus hovering over her notepad. Dr. Heinrich Mueller from Austria had frozen mid-statement, his heavy accent caught between German and English. The third expert, Dr. Rodriguez from Cleveland Clinic, simply gazed at Elena as if she declared plans to wed her houseplant. Yet it was Daniel Whitmore who shattered the shocked quiet. "Elena, this cannot be genuine." Her younger brother's tone carried the cutting edge of fear masquerading as anger. "This is some random black custodian who likely never even completed community college. You're discussing marriage beneath our family's standing in the most humiliating manner imaginable." Isaiah stayed completely motionless, his brown eyes calmly shifting between the siblings. At 35, he'd mastered reading the hidden tensions in spaces where his existence was barely acknowledged. Elena's proposition came from panic, not romance. Daniel's resistance stemmed from something far more disturbing than familial worry. "Daniel, I'm dying." Elena's words carried the burden of someone who'd spent months watching her body fail her. "These accomplished physicians with their impressive credentials and expensive technology cannot identify what's destroying me. Perhaps it's time to attempt something different." The illness had begun quietly. Occasional muscle fatigue that Elena first blamed on pressure from expanding Whitmore Biotech into European markets. Then came the shaking that complicated contract signatures, the mental cloudiness that transformed board sessions into draining cognitive marathons, the joint agony that left her confined to bed for extended periods. Each specialist had arrived confident and left confused. Dr. Chen had eliminated arthritis, neurological disorders, and numerous immune conditions. Dr. Mueller had performed genetic analysis that showed nothing definitive. Dr. Rodriguez had supervised experimental interventions that brought brief improvement before symptoms returned with greater intensity. The most recent blood analysis painted an increasingly dark picture. Elena's inflammation indicators suggested her defense system was attacking something, yet pinpointing the target stayed mysterious. Her neurological signs pointed toward nerve damage, but imaging revealed minimal harm. Most troubling was the advancement. Each month delivered new symptoms and declining capability. "The experimental genetic modification we mentioned involves substantial dangers," Dr. Chen stated cautiously, her medical expertise battling her ethics. "However, Considering the swift progression of your condition, we might need to explore more aggressive options. Alina grasped the implication. The experimental procedure had a 20% survival probability. She was being presented a deadly gamble, and fate wasn't favoring her. Which returns us to my proposition, Alina said, her attention landing on Isaiah. You appeared certain that these doctors are overlooking something. What precisely do you believe you understand that they don't? Daniel positioned himself between them, his posture radiating territorial defense. Alina, this is madness. You'll entrust our family's legacy and your survival to some custodian who probably absorbed medicine from television shows. Isaiah spoke for the first time since Alina's startling proposal. His tone carried quiet command that seemed to catch everyone off guard, including himself. I've been cleaning this facility for 4 years. I've witnessed more medical discussions than most interns observe throughout their complete education. I've noticed patterns that physicians overlook because they're concentrated on standard presentations rather than environmental contributors. Environmental contributors? Dr. Mueller leaned closer, his scientific interest overcoming his doubt. What sort of environmental contributors? The sort that exclusively impacts individuals with unrestricted access to premium products manufactured with exotic elements, Isaiah answered. The sort that generates the perfect conditions when paired with persistent stress and genetic vulnerability. Daniel's expression reddened with fury. You understand, he's simply repeating medical language he doesn't comprehend. This is precisely what these individuals do. They imitate intelligence to exploit desperate families. The prejudiced suggestion struck the room like a physical assault. Dr. Chen's professional mask cracked momentarily, her disapproval clear. Dr. Mueller cleared his throat awkwardly. Dr. Rodriguez concentrated intently on her documents as if recording the interaction for later review. Isaiah's expression remained unchanged, yet something shifted in his bearing. Alina noticed it, a subtle straightening that indicated Daniel had just crossed a boundary that would carry repercussions. These individuals, Alina's tone carried a threatening calm. Daniel, select your following words extremely carefully. Yet her brother was too frightened about his inheritance possibilities to detect the warning. I'm attempting to shield you from creating a catastrophe that will disgrace our entire family. Marrying a custodian is terrible enough, but someone who's obviously executing some sort of medical deception. The quiet that followed was overwhelming. Even the building's ventilation system seemed to pause. Isaiah finally responded, his voice steady and controlled. Miss Whitmore, your brother's worries about my credentials are reasonable. I don't possess medical letters after my name or a certificate on my wall. What I do possess is 8 years of medical training before life circumstances required me to choose a different direction. Alina's eyebrows lifted. 8 years. University of Pennsylvania. I was 7 months from completion when my mother contracted an immune disorder similar to yours. The hospital expenses and her care demands made finishing school unattainable. Daniel scoffed. Convenient narrative. I assume your mother passed away dramatically, providing you deep personal drive to resolve mysterious medical situations. She did pass away, Isaiah stated plainly, because physicians concentrated on managing her symptoms rather than recognizing the environmental triggers that produced them. The gravity of his statement settled across the room. Alina examined Isaiah's expression, searching for indications of dishonesty or manipulation. What she discovered was unexpected. Sorrow balanced by resolve and understanding earned through tragedy rather than classrooms. Dr. Chen, Alina stated without breaking eye contact with Isaiah. From a medical viewpoint, is it conceivable for someone to acquire legitimate knowledge outside conventional education? Dr. Chen pondered her response carefully. Medical understanding exists in numerous forms. Some of our greatest advances have originated from unexpected sources. The question isn't whether Mr. Williams possesses formal credentials, but whether his observations hold validity. Daniel's panic escalated. You're all behaving like this makes logic. Alina, if you proceed with this insane marriage proposition, the board will proclaim you mentally unfit. I'll guarantee it. There it was, the genuine motivation behind Daniel's protests, not family dignity or medical concern, but the possibility of inheriting $13 billion vanishing because his sister might actually survive. Alina's smile contained no warmth. Daniel, I believe you've stated sufficient. I'm attempting to rescue you from. You're attempting to rescue yourself from losing an inheritance you've never earned. The charge hung between them like a weapon. Daniel's expression cycled through denial, rage, and finally an icy calculation that verified Alina's suspicion. Isaiah observed the family conflict develop with the removed interest of someone who'd learned to watch rather than engage. Yet when Daniel redirected his focus toward him, the calculation transformed into something more threatening. Fine, Daniel stated. Let's suppose we entertain this fantasy. What precisely is your miracle explanation, custodian? The disdain in his tone was calculated to provoke. Isaiah recognized the strategy. Compel him to exceed his knowledge, reveal himself as a fraud, and eliminate the threat to Daniel's inheritance through one public humiliation. Yet Isaiah had spent 4 years preparing for this opportunity, even if he'd never imagined it would arrive as a marriage proposition from a desperate billionaire. I'll require access to your comprehensive medical documentation, Isaiah said to Alina. Your travel history for the previous 3 years, a thorough inventory of your jewelry, cosmetics, and any supplements you consume consistently. And I'll need to conduct some examinations that your other physicians haven't considered. Dr. Mueller frowned. What sort of examinations? Heavy metal analysis, specifically rare earth components used in premium manufacturing. I suspect Miss Whitmore's condition isn't genetic or immune-related in the conventional sense. I believe she's being gradually poisoned by her own way of living. The room erupted in conversation. Dr. Chen retrieved her phone, already investigating heavy metal poisoning. Dr. Mueller began questioning Isaiah about particular symptoms and patterns. Dr. Rodriguez recorded notes frantically, her medical curiosity completely activated. Yet Daniel saw only one thing: his inheritance departing on the foundation of a theory suggested by someone he regarded as inferior in every dimension that mattered to him. The battle for Alina's survival was about to commence, and Isaiah was about to learn that saving her would require overcoming more than just a mysterious illness. Yet what Isaiah was about to disclose would shatter everything these internationally recognized physicians believed they understood, and Daniel would attempt anything to prevent him. The significance of Alina's marriage proposition settled over Isaiah like a recognizable weight. Another instance when existence demanded he demonstrate his value to individuals who'd already concluded he possessed none. Yet this moment felt unique. This moment the consequences weren't simply his dignity or his employment. Someone's survival hung in uncertainty. And he'd experienced this before. Philadelphia, 16 years earlier. Isaiah had knelt beside his mother's hospital bed, monitoring equipment displaying the same confusing array of symptoms that now troubled Alina Whitmore. The contradiction wasn't overlooked. A billionaire and a community health practitioner, divided by every conceivable obstacle except the disease that didn't discriminate based on wealth. Every patient merits the accurate diagnosis, sweetheart. His mother's voice had grown faint, yet her determination stayed powerful even as the immune disorder devastated her body. Doesn't matter if they can purchase the fancy facility or the public clinic. The truth is the truth. Grace Williams had spent 22 years serving Philadelphia's underserved neighborhoods, addressing everything from childhood respiratory issues to diabetic crises in areas where ambulances arrived delayed, and specialist visits were privileges few could access. She taught Isaiah to observe patterns that others overlooked, not because she possessed some mystical perception, but because necessity had sharpened her observational abilities to a precise edge. The human body communicates exactly what's incorrect, she'd explained during his childhood, permitting him to accompany her during home visits. But you must listen to what it's genuinely expressing, not what you anticipate hearing. Those teachings had carried Isaiah through 8 years at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. While his classmates depended on standard presentations and systematic reasoning, Isaiah learned to observe environmental elements that conventional medical education often missed. His professors had remarked on his unusual diagnostic method, a blend of clinical precision and practical pattern detection that distinguished him from his peers. The complete scholarship had seemed like salvation, a route from poverty that would respect his mother's legacy while ensuring financial stability for both of them. Isaiah had dedicated himself to his studies with focused determination, maintaining exceptional grades while working part-time positions to supplement his living costs. Then arrived the telephone call that altered everything. "Isaiah, darling, I need you to return home." His mother's voice had carried a tremor he'd never heard previously. "Something's incorrect with me, and the physicians here don't understand what it is." The symptoms had started quietly, joint discomfort that Grace attributed to years of being on her feet. Muscle fatigue she blamed on pressure from managing the clinic's persistent understaffing. Yet as weeks progressed, the pattern became unmistakable. Her immune system was attacking something, yet identifying the target proved mysterious. Isaiah had driven home that weekend expecting to provide comfort and perhaps help coordinate improved medical attention. Instead, he discovered his mother bedridden, her condition deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. The local physicians were confused. Specialist visits required months-long delays they couldn't manage. Insurance authorization for experimental interventions stayed perpetually under consideration. "I cannot abandon you like this," Isaiah had told her, already understanding what his choice would cost him. "Sweetheart, you're 7 months from completing medical school, 7 months from possessing the understanding and credentials to assist individuals like me." "You're not individuals like you, you're my mother." Grace had smiled through her suffering. "And that's precisely why you must finish school, so this doesn't occur to someone else's mother." Yet Isaiah couldn't observe her suffer while pursuing theoretical understanding that wouldn't arrive promptly to rescue her. He'd withdrawn from medical school, forfeiting his scholarship and his aspirations to become his mother's full-time caregiver and medical representative. The following 9 months had been an intensive course in medical frustration. Isaiah had investigated every symptom, contacted specialists nationwide, and gradually developed a theory about environmental triggers that nobody wanted to acknowledge. His mother's condition shared disturbing similarities with cases he'd located in obscure medical publications. Immune reactions triggered by particular combinations of chemical exposures and genetic predispositions. Yet without medical credentials, his insights were dismissed as desperate speculation from a grieving son. The experimental intervention he'd identified stayed inaccessible due to expense and administrative obstacles. Grace Williams died on a Wednesday morning in April, her hand held in her son's as he whispered promises he hadn't yet determined how to fulfill. "Every failure is a failure in understanding," Isaiah stated quietly, the words carrying 16 years of sorrow and determination. "Between human and environment, between what we believe we understand and what actually exists." Elena looked up from the medical documentation she'd been examining. "What did you state?" "Something my mother taught me. She believed that illness doesn't deceive. It communicates exactly what's incorrect if you listen carefully enough." Daniel rolled his eyes. More simplistic wisdom from the custodian philosopher. "Elena, this is becoming absurd." Yet Dr. Chen had stopped taking notes, her attention completely concentrated on Isaiah. "Your mother, was she in healthcare?" "Community health practitioner. 22 years serving Philadelphia's underserved populations. She passed away from an immune disorder similar to your sister's because the medical establishment couldn't see beyond their assumptions about environmental triggers." The quiet that followed carried significance. Isaiah had just disclosed his deepest motivation and his greatest failure simultaneously. Elena examined his expression, searching for indications of manipulation or emotional exploitation. Instead, she discovered something that resonated with her own desperation. The look of someone who'd already lost everything that mattered and possessed nothing remaining to lose. "The truth doesn't care about your credentials," Isaiah continued, his voice carrying quiet conviction. "It doesn't care about your background or your wealth. Disease is impartial that way. It impacts wealthy and poor similarly, yet the solutions often hide in locations that prestigious institutions won't examine." The medical documentation spread across the conference table like puzzle pieces that had defied solution for 9 months. Elena Whitmore's complete medical history painted a picture of progressive decline that had stumped some of the world's most brilliant minds. Now, in a moment that challenged every convention of medical hierarchy, she was about to entrust her survival to a custodian armed with theories instead of degrees. 72 hours, Elena announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making billion-dollar choices. "That's the time you have to prove your theory before I proceed with the experimental genetic modification." Dr. Chen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Miss Whitmore, I must advise against postponing treatment. Your condition is advancing rapidly and the genetic modification has a 20% survival probability," Elena interrupted. "I believe I can spare 4 days to explore an alternative that doesn't involve deadly odds." Daniel Whitmore had been packing behind the conference table like a trapped animal, his inheritance slipping further away with each moment his sister remained alive and coherent. The marriage proposition had been shocking enough, yet now Elena was genuinely considering medical guidance from someone Daniel viewed as fundamentally inferior. "This is insane," Daniel exploded, his composure finally cracking completely. "You're going to risk your survival on theories from some black custodian who probably couldn't even gain admission to medical school." Isaiah looked up from the medical documentation, his expression calm despite the racial insult disguised as worry. "Actually, I completed 8 years at University of Pennsylvania before circumstances required me to depart." "Circumstances?" Daniel's laugh carried no humor. "Let me guess, you couldn't manage the academic demands, or perhaps you were expelled for dishonesty." The accusation lingered like poison. Dr. Mueller cleared his throat awkwardly while Dr. Rodriguez concentrated intently on her notes to avoid witnessing the exchange. Even Dr. Chen, who'd maintained professional neutrality, appeared disturbed by Daniel's escalating hostility. Isaiah remained perfectly motionless, yet Elena caught the subtle tightening around his eyes. She'd spent sufficient time in corporate boardrooms to recognize when someone was being systematically attacked, and she'd developed a particular aversion to individuals who weaponized prejudice to advance their own agendas. "Daniel, you're out of line," Elena stated sharply. "I'm attempting to rescue your survival from a con artist who's obviously targeting wealthy individuals with false medical expertise." The quiet that followed was overwhelming. Daniel had just crossed from subtle prejudice into explicit accusations that revealed the ugly core of his motivations. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice carrying quiet dignity that made Daniel's panic seem even more pathetic by comparison. "My mother passed away while I was caring for her. The financial burden of her hospital expenses and the time required for her care made completing medical school impossible." Elena felt something shift inside her chest. Not sympathy precisely, but recognition. She'd built her biotech empire on the principle that healthcare shouldn't be rationed by economic standing. Yet here was someone who'd sacrificed his own medical career to provide care that the system had failed to deliver. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol concerns. "Mr. Williams, you mentioned environmental triggers. Can you be more precise about your hypothesis?" Isaiah moved to the wall-mounted whiteboard, his movements confident despite the hostile audience. "Miss Whitmore's symptoms suggest immune dysfunction, yet the progression pattern doesn't match conventional presentations. The key is identifying what her immune system is actually attacking." He began sketching a timeline on the board, correlating Alina's symptom onset with her travel schedule and business activities. His handwriting was precise, his medical language accurate, and his logic methodical. Daniel observed with growing alarm as Isaiah demonstrated understanding that contradicted every assumption about his capabilities. Heavy metal poisoning, Isaiah stated, circling specific dates on the timeline. Specifically, rare earth components used in premium manufacturing. Miss Whitmore's way of living provides unrestricted access to products containing materials that most individuals never encounter. Dr. Mueller frowned. Heavy metals can produce neurological symptoms, yet the immune component is triggered when the immune system identifies metal-damaged tissue as foreign, Isaiah finished. The body begins attacking itself because it cannot distinguish between healthy cells and cells altered by toxic exposure. Daniel stepped closer to the whiteboard, his voice dripping with condescension. So your brilliant theory is that my sister is being poisoned by her jewelry. That's the medical breakthrough that's going to rescue her survival. It's more complex than that, Isaiah replied patiently. The poisoning requires a perfect storm of factors: genetic predisposition, persistent stress that suppresses natural elimination, and exposure to particular combinations of rare earth components. Miss Whitmore's high-stress business lifestyle, combined with her access to custom jewelry and cosmetics manufactured with exotic materials, creates the ideal conditions. Alina had been listening intently, her business mind processing the logic of Isaiah's hypothesis. What sort of examination would prove your theory? Comprehensive heavy metal analysis focusing on elements like europium, dysprosium, and terbium. Hair follicle examination to establish exposure timeline. Genetic testing for elimination pathway variations. Dr. Chen was already retrieving her phone. I can arrange those examinations immediately. Daniel's panic reached a new level as he observed the medical team take Isaiah seriously. You're all being manipulated by someone who's clearly investigated Alina's symptoms online and is repeating information to seem knowledgeable. Then it should be easy to disprove his theory, Alina stated coolly. If the examination shows no heavy metal poisoning, we proceed with genetic modification. If it confirms his hypothesis, we explore treatment options. The room fell quiet, except for the scratch of Dr. Rodriguez's stylus as she documented every exchange. Isaiah recognized the moment for what it was, a public trial where his credibility would be tested against established medical authority. Yet unlike the academic environment he'd been forced to abandon, this trial had immediate life-or-death repercussions. Daniel made one final desperate attempt to regain control. Alina, if you proceed with this circus, I'll petition the board to declare you mentally incompetent. No judge will support medical choices based on guidance from an unqualified custodian. Alina's smile held ice-cold calculation. Daniel, I believe we're beyond the point where your opinion matters. I'm attempting to protect our family's legacy. You're attempting to protect your inheritance possibilities. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Daniel's expression cycled through denial, rage, and finally cold hatred directed squarely at Isaiah. This is your fault, he snarled. Coming in here with your false medical theories, exploiting my sister's desperation. Isaiah met Daniel's glare without flinching. I'm attempting to rescue her survival. You're attempting to destroy our family. Dr. Chen cleared her throat, her professional training reasserting itself. Gentlemen, we have 72 hours to conduct comprehensive examination and evaluate Mr. Williams' hypothesis. I suggest we concentrate on medical evidence rather than personal conflicts. Alina nodded. Dr. Chen is correct. Isaiah, you'll have complete access to my medical documentation, examination results, and whatever resources you require. Daniel, you can either support this process or remove yourself from it. Daniel's expression promised that this confrontation was far from finished. Yet for now, Isaiah had been granted the opportunity he'd never expected, a chance to prove that sometimes the most important medical breakthroughs originate from the most unlikely sources. The genuine test was about to commence. The laboratory results arrived precisely 49 hours later, delivered by a courier who seemed unaware that he was carrying evidence that could revolutionize environmental medicine. Isaiah spread the examination reports across the conference table like a detective presenting clues to a mystery case, while the assembled medical team leaned forward with the intensity of individuals witnessing either a breakthrough or an elaborate deception. "The heavy metal analysis confirms everything," Isaiah stated, his finger tracing the abnormal values highlighted in red across multiple pages. "Europium levels 19 times normal range, dysprosium at 23 times baseline, terbium concentrations that shouldn't exist in human tissue." Dr. Chen adjusted her glasses, examining the numbers with growing amazement. "These levels are extraordinary. How is this conceivable?" Daniel Whitmore stood behind the group like a storm cloud, his expression cycling between disbelief and fury. Those examinations could be fabricated. This entire thing could be an elaborate deception conducted by some failed medical student. "The examinations were performed at your own facility's laboratory," Dr. Mueller pointed out dryly. "Unless you're suggesting your staff is part of the conspiracy." Isaiah ignored Daniel's racial hostility and moved to the whiteboard where he'd prepared a comprehensive analysis that would either vindicate his theory or expose him as a fraud. "This isn't just about metal poisoning. It's about how premium manufacturing creates the perfect storm for immune dysfunction in individuals with unlimited purchasing power." He began his first revelation with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 4 years preparing for this moment, knowing that every word would be scrutinized by individuals seeking reasons to dismiss him. First revelation: the luxury trap. Miss Whitmore's jewelry collection contains pieces manufactured with rare earth components that most individuals never encounter, Isaiah explained, displaying photographs of Alina's custom pieces alongside their detailed materials analysis. "This platinum necklace contains europium oxide particles for luminescent properties that make the diamonds appear more brilliant under certain lighting conditions. These titanium earrings use dysprosium for magnetic enhancement that allows for innovative clasp mechanisms. The rose gold bracelet incorporates terbium for its unique fluorescent characteristics that create subtle color variations in different environments." Alina examined her jewelry with new eyes, pieces she'd worn dozens of times without considering their exotic composition. Each item represented cutting-edge materials science applied to luxury fashion, creating products that were as much technological marvels as fashion statements. "Yet these are from the most exclusive designers in Europe," Alina protested. "Surely they meet all safety standards." "They do," Isaiah replied, pulling up regulatory documents on his tablet. "For normal exposure levels. European Union standards assume occasional wearing for special events, not daily use by someone who owns multiple pieces and rotates them consistently." Daniel stepped closer to the display, his voice dripping with condescension. "So now you're an expert on European jewelry regulations. Did you learn that during your custodial education?" Isaiah continued without acknowledging the interruption. "Rare earth components become poisonous through accumulation, not acute exposure. Your skin absorbs microscopic amounts every time you wear these pieces. The absorption rate increases with skin temperature, humidity, and duration of contact." He moved to a second whiteboard covered with chemical equations and absorption calculations that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of toxicology. "Normally, your body's elimination systems would remove these metals through liver processing and kidney filtration. The liver enzymes break down metal protein complexes, while the kidneys excrete the byproducts through urine." Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her rapidly filling notepad. "What's preventing normal elimination in Miss Whitmore's case?" Isaiah smiled, the first genuine expression of satisfaction he'd shown since this ordeal began. "That brings us to the second revelation, which explains why this condition impacts successful business executives disproportionately. Second revelation: the stress multiplier. Persistent psychological stress doesn't just impact mental well-being, Isaiah continued, pulling up Alina's business calendar and travel schedule on the room's large display screen. Examine this timeline spanning the previous 19 months. Major merger negotiations with biotech companies in Germany and Austria. Board conflicts over international expansion strategies. Acquisition choices involving hundreds of millions in capital investment. The calendar painted a picture of relentless pressure that would challenge anyone's physiological resilience. Board sessions in Chicago followed by overnight flights to manufacturing facilities in Asia. Regulatory hearings in Washington sandwiched between investor presentations in London. The lifestyle of someone who'd built a global empire through sheer determination and sacrificed personal well-being for professional achievement. Each of these high-stress events triggers sustained elevation of cortisol, adrenaline, and inflammatory compounds. Isaiah explained, drawing connections between Alina's most demanding business periods and her symptom progression with forensic precision. Here, November merger discussions with Schmidt Biotech coincide precisely with your first episodes of muscle fatigue. January board crisis over the Asian expansion matches the onset of cognitive symptoms that you attributed to exhaustion. April acquisition deadline for the Austrian manufacturing facility aligns perfectly with the beginning of joint discomfort that progressed from occasional distress to daily disability. Dr. Chen was frantically documenting the correlations, her medical training recognizing patterns that she'd missed during previous consultations. Persistent cortisol elevation would suppress liver enzyme activity, reducing the liver's ability to process foreign compounds. Precisely, Isaiah confirmed. Yet the stress response also compromises intestinal barrier function, allowing increased absorption of toxins from the digestive tract. Your high-pressure lifestyle creates a perfect storm, increased toxin absorption combined with decreased elimination capacity. Daniel had been growing visibly agitated, as Isaiah demonstrated understanding that contradicted every prejudiced assumption about his intellectual capabilities. "This is all correlation without causation," he interrupted. "Successful individuals experience stress. That doesn't mean stress produces mysterious illnesses." "There's more," Isaiah stated, moving to his third section of analysis. "Miss Whitmore, what supplements do you consume consistently for executive performance and stress management?" Alina consulted her phone, reading from a list that reflected the optimization-obsessed culture of high achievers. Vitamin D3 for immune support, omega-3 for cognitive function, magnesium for muscle recovery, and a custom mineral supplement my executive nutritionist recommended specifically for high-stress business environments. Isaiah was already displaying the supplement's detailed ingredient list, with several components highlighted in red. Your custom executive mineral supplement contains trace amounts of the same rare earth components found in your jewelry. The manufacturer uses them as bioavailability enhancers, microscopic quantities that are supposed to help your body absorb other nutrients more effectively. The room fell quiet as the implications became clear. Alina wasn't just being exposed to poisonous metals from external jewelry. She was voluntarily ingesting them daily in pursuit of peak performance, creating a multi-route exposure scenario that conventional medicine would never suspect. So the jewelry provides skin exposure, the supplements provide digestive exposure, and the stress prevents elimination, Dr. Mueller summarized, his voice reflecting growing amazement at the complexity of the interaction. Yet how does this environmental exposure trigger such severe immune dysfunction? Daniel made one more desperate attempt to discredit Isaiah's analysis. Even if these metal levels are genuine, how do we understand they're producing her symptoms? This could all be coincidental. Isaiah moved to his final revelation with the confidence of someone who'd solved a puzzle that had stumped the world's leading medical institutions. Third revelation, the immune cascade. When rare earth metals accumulate in human tissue, they bind to cellular proteins and alter their three-dimensional molecular structure, Isaiah explained, drawing detailed cellular diagrams that demonstrated graduate-level understanding of biochemistry and immunology. Your immune system encounters these metallized proteins and correctly identifies them as foreign substances that don't belong in human physiology. He displayed microscopic images from Alina's latest tissue biopsy, pointing to specific cellular changes that the original pathologists had documented but misinterpreted. Observe these protein aggregations in the muscle tissue. They're not random inflammatory indicators or genetic abnormalities. They're immune complexes formed when antibodies target metal-damaged cellular proteins. Dr. Chen leaned closer to examine the high-resolution images, her expression shifting from skepticism to fascination. The molecular mimicry phenomenon would explain the progressive multi-system nature of her symptoms. The immune system learns to recognize the metallized proteins as foreign threats, Isaiah continued, his explanation revealing deep understanding of immunological mechanisms. Yet, because the rare earth metals distribute throughout the body via systemic circulation, binding to proteins in multiple organ systems, the immune response becomes generalized rather than localized. He moved to a detailed anatomical chart, showing metal distribution patterns based on Alina's imaging studies. Muscle tissue shows the highest concentration because of increased blood flow during stress responses. Nervous system involvement occurs because metals cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to nerve proteins. Joint symptoms result from metal accumulation in connective tissue, where immune complexes trigger inflammatory cascades. Daniel had been growing increasingly desperate as Isaiah demonstrated expertise that shattered every prejudiced assumption about his intellectual capacity. "This is all theoretical nonsense," he exploded. "Even if your exotic metal poisoning theory is correct, what's your miracle cure? How do you propose to reverse months of immune damage?" Isaiah turned to face Daniel directly, his expression calm but radiating quiet confidence. Graduated chelation therapy using DMSA and EDTA protocols to remove accumulated metals without causing mineral depletion. Specific probiotic strains including Lactobacillus rhamnosus and Bifidobacterium longum to restore intestinal barrier function and support liver elimination pathways. Targeted anti-inflammatory intervention using curcumin, omega-3 fatty acids, and low-dose naltrexone to interrupt the immune cascade. And comprehensive stress management, including meditation, exercise modification, and business schedule restructuring to allow the body's natural healing mechanisms to function optimally. Modified chelation therapy, Dr. Mueller frowned, his European training making him cautious about unconventional treatments. That's typically reserved for acute heavy metal poisoning in industrial accidents, not persistent low-level exposure in premium consumers. Graduated chelation, Isaiah clarified, displaying research protocols from environmental medicine journals that most traditional physicians had never encountered. Lower doses administered over extended periods combined with targeted nutritional support to prevent essential mineral depletion. The goal isn't rapid elimination that could cause redistribution effects and actually worsen symptoms. The goal is gradual metal removal while supporting the body's innate healing capacity. He displayed peer-reviewed research papers from environmental medicine specialists who'd been documenting similar cases for decades. Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt in Germany has published extensively on this approach for treating metal-induced autoimmunity. Dr. Sherry Rogers in the United States has documented hundreds of similar cases. Dr. Andrew Cutler's chelation protocols have been refined through clinical experience with thousands of patients. The medical literature exists, and the treatment outcomes are documented, yet it's outside mainstream immune treatment algorithms. Alina examined the comprehensive treatment plan Isaiah had prepared, noting its methodical approach and detailed monitoring protocols. This wasn't the desperate gamble of someone grasping at alternative medicine straws. It was a carefully researched intervention based on established environmental medicine principles applied to an unusual but well-documented presentation. 73 hours later, The conference room had transformed into an impromptu medical theater, where Alina Whitmore's survival hung in uncertainty. The cherrywood table now supported equipment, monitoring devices, and chelation solutions that represented Isaiah's last chance to prove his theory could succeed where world-renowned institutions had failed. Daniel Whitmore paced behind the medical team like a predator waiting for his prey to collapse. His sister's recovery would destroy both his inheritance possibilities and his fundamental beliefs about racial superiority. He'd spent 4 days making desperate calls to board members attempting to declare Alina mentally incompetent. "This is medical malpractice," Daniel announced. "When this kills her, I'm holding everyone responsible." Dr. Chen ignored his commentary while reviewing Isaiah's chelation protocol. The treatment plan was methodical and conservative, designed to gradually remove accumulated metals without triggering dangerous redistribution effects. "Walk us through the monitoring parameters," Dr. Chen requested. Isaiah moved between equipment stands with quiet confidence. DMSA chelation at half-standard dosing. Continuous cardiac monitoring because rare earth metals affect electrical conduction. Hourly neurological assessments. Blood chemistry panels every 7 hours to monitor kidney function. The equipment contained a clear solution that looked deceptively simple for something that could either rescue Alina's survival or confirm Daniel's disaster predictions. Isaiah had calculated dosing based on Alina's weight, kidney function, and metal burden. "Initial chelation will mobilize metals from tissue storage," Isaiah explained as he started the infusion under Dr. Chen's supervision. "Temporary symptom worsening is normal as metals enter circulation before elimination." Alina lay on the hospital bed, her business attire replaced by a gown that made her vulnerable in ways 13 billion couldn't protect against. "How long before we know if it's working?" 13 to 19 hours for metal mobilization, 49 hours for immune response. If I'm correct, cognitive function improves first, followed by muscle strength and joint pain relief. Daniel stepped closer, his voice carrying false concern. "And if you're wrong, what happens when this experimental treatment kills her?" Isaiah met Daniel's hostile gaze steadily. "If I'm wrong, chelation will have no significant effect, and she can proceed with genetic modification. Conservative dosing makes serious adverse effects extremely unlikely." "Extremely unlikely isn't impossible," Daniel pressed. "You're gambling with her survival based on theories developed while mopping floors." The prejudiced implication poisoned the air, yet Alina's voice cut through the tension. "Daniel, I've made my choice. Either support it or leave. I'm attempting to protect you from a fatal mistake. You're attempting to protect your inheritance." The accusation silenced Daniel temporarily, yet his expression promised continued confrontation regardless of outcome. Isaiah focused on his patient, checking vitals and documenting baseline measurements. The first 7 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Alina experienced expected metal mobilization symptoms, mild nausea, headache, increased fatigue as chelated metals entered her bloodstream. Daniel interpreted every discomfort as evidence of Isaiah's incompetence. Then at hour 9, something remarkable happened. "The mental cloudiness is lifting," Alina announced, her voice carrying clarity absent for months. "I can think clearly for the first time since this started." Dr. Chen immediately began cognitive assessments, testing memory, attention, and processing speed. Alina's performance showed marked improvement from baseline scores. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Her mind functioned at levels she hadn't experienced in nearly a year. "Placebo effect," Daniel insisted desperately. "She feels better because she wants to feel better." By hour 17, improvements became undeniable. Alina's muscle tremors decreased significantly. Joint discomfort dropped from constant agony to manageable distress. Most importantly, energy levels returned to something approaching normal for the first time in months. Isaiah continued monitoring with quiet intensity, documenting every parameter while avoiding premature celebration. He'd learned from his mother's illness that medical improvements could be temporary. At hour 25, Dr. Chen performed comprehensive neurological testing that confirmed observable improvements. Elena Whitmore was getting better, not just feeling better, but demonstrably improving according to objective measurements that couldn't be explained by wishful thinking. Metal elimination proceeds exactly as predicted, Isaiah reported, reviewing blood chemistry results. Europium levels dropped 62%, dysprosium down 74%, terbium showing similar reduction. Daniel's expression went pale watching his inheritance evaporate with his sister's toxic burden. This doesn't prove anything long-term. Temporary improvement doesn't mean permanent cure. Yet Elena was sitting up without assistance, her movements coordinated and purposeful in ways impossible just days earlier. For the first time in 9 months, she looked like someone who would live. The moment of truth had arrived. Isaiah Williams, the custodian dismissed and attacked for daring to offer medical expertise, had proven that sometimes the most important discoveries originate from the most unexpected sources. Yet this was just the beginning. What happened next would restore faith in justice. The transformation in Elena Whitmore was undeniable. After 49 hours of chelation therapy, she stood at the conference room window overlooking Chicago, her posture straight, and movements fluid for the first time in 9 months. The tremors had vanished. The cognitive fog had lifted. The woman who'd been preparing for experimental genetic modification with 20% survival rates was now discussing business strategies with her characteristic sharp focus. Dr. Chen completed her final neurological assessment with barely concealed amazement. Complete normalization of reflexes, coordination, and cognitive function. Mr. Williams, this is remarkable work. Isaiah felt profound satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving anyone wrong, and everything to do with honoring his mother's memory. Environmental medicine rescues lives when we're willing to look beyond conventional diagnostic categories. Daniel Whitmore slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, watching 13 billion slip permanently beyond his reach. His prejudiced assumptions hadn't just been morally wrong, they'd been catastrophically expensive. Elena was going to live, thrive, and remember exactly how her brother had tried to prevent her recovery. The board will want a complete presentation, Elena stated, her voice carrying executive authority that illness had temporarily stolen. Isaiah, I'm creating a new position, Director of Environmental Medicine Research. Complete medical school funding included, naturally. Dr. Chen stepped forward with an offer that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Princeton would be honored to offer you a research fellowship, Mr. Williams. Your diagnostic approach deserves wider recognition. Isaiah considered the opportunities spreading before him like doors opening onto futures he'd stopped allowing himself to imagine. Medical school completion, research position, the chance to prevent other families from experiencing what his mother had endured. I accept the research position, Isaiah stated to Elena, and I accept your marriage proposal. The room fell silent. Elena raised an eyebrow with amusement rather than surprise. You're serious about that part? You made an offer in good faith when you were desperate. I honored my part by rescuing your survival. Now you honor yours. Elena examined Isaiah with new respect, recognizing someone who understood that integrity meant keeping commitments even when circumstances changed. Then I suppose we have a wedding to plan. Daniel's expression promised that family dinners would be interesting for years to come. 7 months later, the Whitmore Healthcare Complex boardroom hosted a very different kind of meeting. Elena Whitmore Williams sat at the head of the polished table, her maiden name now hyphenated with that of the man who'd rescued her survival and become her equal partner in both marriage and medicine. The quarterly board meeting was reviewing the most profitable year in company history, driven largely by breakthrough treatments in environmental medicine that had revolutionized immune care. Isaiah Williams, now Dr. Isaiah Williams, after completing his medical degree through an accelerated program, presented research findings that had attracted international attention. Our environmental medicine division has identified similar toxic exposures in 49 cases across 14 countries. The treatment protocols we've developed show consistent success rates exceeding 92%. The same physicians who'd initially dismissed Isaiah as a delusional custodian now cited his research in their own publications. Dr. Chen had co-authored 4 papers with him that were reshaping how medical schools taught environmental toxicology. Even Dr. Mueller had invited Isaiah to speak at the Austrian Medical Conference, a reversal that spoke volumes about the power of results over prejudice. Yet the most dramatic transformation sat at the far end of the table, where Daniel Whitmore occupied a much diminished role as Junior Vice President of Operations, a position Alina had created specifically to keep him under close supervision while forcing him to confront his biases daily. Daniel's prejudice training is progressing well, Alina reported matter-of-factly, as if discussing quarterly earnings. Dr. Thompson believes another 7 months of therapy should address the underlying supremacist attitudes that nearly cost me my survival. Daniel's expression had aged considerably since his inheritance dreams collapsed. Court-mandated psychological evaluation had revealed deep-seated racial prejudices that the family's lawyers had insisted on addressing through comprehensive therapy rather than public scandal. He was required to work directly under Isaiah's supervision, a daily reminder that the man he'd tried to destroy was now his superior in every measurable way. The Environmental Medicine Foundation has received its largest donation to date, Isaiah announced, pulling up financial projections. The Schmidt Family Trust contributed $52 million specifically for research into luxury product toxicity affecting underserved communities. The contradiction wasn't lost on anyone present. Isaiah had transformed his personal tragedy into a research mission that would prevent countless others from suffering similar losses. His mother's passing had become the foundation for discoveries that would rescue lives across economic and racial boundaries. Alina smiled at her husband with genuine affection that had surprised everyone, including herself. Their marriage had begun as a desperate bargain, yet evolved into partnership based on mutual respect and shared mission. Isaiah has also been invited to testify before Congress about regulatory gaps in premium manufacturing safety standards. The biotech empire that Alina had inherited was now leading industry changes rather than following them. Whitmore Biotech had voluntarily implemented the most stringent environmental testing protocols in the industry, turning ethical leadership into competitive advantage. Daniel cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The therapy sessions have been educational," he admitted reluctantly. "I'm beginning to understand how my assumptions about ethnicity and intelligence were not only morally wrong, but factually baseless." It was the closest thing to an apology anyone had heard from him, though Isaiah suspected it would take years before Daniel's transformation became genuine rather than performative. The wedding anniversary celebration next month will include a scholarship announcement, Alina continued. The Grace Williams Memorial Fund will provide complete medical school funding for students from underserved communities who demonstrate Isaiah's combination of clinical insight and environmental awareness. Isaiah felt his mother's presence in that moment, her life's work finally receiving the recognition and continuation she deserved. The custodian who'd been dismissed and attacked had become the architect of systemic change that would reshape medicine for generations. Justice had arrived not through punishment, but through the much more satisfying path of proving that excellence transcends every barrier that prejudice attempts to construct. 3 years later, Isaiah Williams stood before a packed auditorium at Harvard Medical School, delivering the keynote address that would have seemed impossible when he was cleaning their conference rooms. His environmental medicine protocols had rescued over 320 lives worldwide, transforming luxury-induced immune disease from a death sentence into a treatable condition. Alina sat in the front row, their 7-month-old daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. The Whitmore Williams Environmental Medicine Institute had become the global leader in identifying and treating toxicity-related illnesses that traditional medicine had missed for decades. Daniel worked quietly in the background now, his transformation from prejudiced saboteur to humbled advocate serving as proof that even the most entrenched prejudices could be overcome through consistent exposure to truth. Excellence doesn't announce itself with credentials or pedigree, Isaiah concluded his lecture. It shows up quietly, persistently, and waits for the world to become desperate enough to listen. Sometimes the person who can rescue you is the one you least expect, if you're brave enough to ignore the voices trying to silence them. Have you ever been the one with the answer, while others attempted to silence you because of who you are? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone facing similar challenges today. And here's something for sharp-eyed viewers. Go back and watch Daniel's facial expression when Isaiah first mentions environmental triggers. You'll observe the exact moment he realizes his inheritance is in jeopardy. If this story reminded you that brilliance comes in unexpected forms, and that keeping your word matters even when it costs everything, hit that subscribe button. Because everyone deserves to see talent recognized over prejudice and love built on respect rather than desperation.